Hello, everybody. So we're going to look at Saxon Math Course 1. This is Lesson 104. This is an algebraic addition activity. So let's just jump right into it. Numbers greater than 0 are written with a positive sign or no sign at all. Numbers that are less than 0 are always written with a negative sign. When an algebraic expression represents the addition or subtraction of positive and negative numbers, we look at the sign of the number to determine the mathematical operation we use to simplify the expression. Sometimes we enclose numbers in parentheses so that the sign of the number negative sign, which would be the negative sign, can be expressed separately from the operation, which is a minus symbol. So, for example, how would we read this expression here? If you have positive 2 equals a positive 2, in a sense, it could be this. You see there's a little bit of a space here. It could be plus 2 equals a positive 2. So you can see the little space between the positive symbol or the plus sign and the 2 helps us understand, oh, that's a plus 2 instead of just simply a positive 2. Here's an example of plus a positive 2 equals a positive 2. This would be minus a negative 2 equals a positive 2. Here is the negative of a negative 2 equals positive 2. So when it's in parentheses like that, it's a negative of a negative 2 equaling a positive 2. So here's an algebraic activity that you would do if you were going to do, they call it the sign game. And in the sign game, pairs of positive and negative charges become neutral. After determining the neutral pairs, we count the signs that remain and then write our answer. There are 4 different skill levels to the game called the sign game. Be sure you're successful at one level before moving on to the next level. So here's what it might look like before the battle. You got positive, positive, negative, 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 negative. 4 positives and 3 negatives. After the battle, you might end up with this, where you had these 2 negatives end up being canceling each other out. Or sorry, you would have these 2 canceling each other out. These 2 would cancel each other out. You could have another set, this one and this one cancel each other out. And all that you're left with after the battle is 1 positive. So that means if this was the start, this would be the finish. Again, you could just do a positive and a negative. They cancel each other out. A positive and a negative cancel each other out. And that one cancels each other out. All you're left with is a positive. So if these had numbers in front of them, if there was number, like 2, 2, if these are all 2s, for example, then we would have these canceling each other out. This would be 0, this would be 0, this would be 0. All you'd be left with is one number that's positive, and it'd be a 2. So that's getting a little ahead of ourselves. Let's try this again. So what would be the ones that you could cancel out here? Well, I can see this cancels itself out. This positive and that negative, this positive and negative, this positive and negative cancel each other out, and this positive and negative cancel each other out. So all would be left is this negative. And this one would be that, this one would be there, those cancel each other out, those would cancel each other out. So in that case, all you would have left is 0. There's nothing. 0 remain. In this one, in this case, you'd have nothing canceling itself out, so you really, in the end, have 7 negatives. So 7 negatives. That's what would remain here, because you see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, if we're going to level up, now we're just going to add some numbers to these. So here you would see that this positive and this negative would help cancel each other out, but in the end, all that you're going to be left with in this case, if you were to group all of these forces, you would want to group the positives, and let me use green for positives. So if we were to group those positives, we'd end up with positive 4. And if we were to group the negatives, in this case, negative 5 and negative 2, that would be negative 7. We group those together, we end up with those new numbers. So we'd have a positive 4 and a negative 7. So you could do this. A positive 4 plus a negative 7 is the same as 4 minus 7, which on a number line, if you were to look at that, on a number line, you would end up with a negative 3. So the answer to this grouping here would be negative 3 for all of these. So that, as you can see, that's what you'd end up with. These two here, and then you'd have a negative 3. On this one, you're going to end up with, you've got this positive 5 plus the 4 and the 3. So that ends up being 9 plus 3 is 12. You'd have a positive 12. And then your negative values, you'd have these two grouped together, which would make a negative 10. So it'd be like plus a negative 10. And in that case, hopefully you all know what 12 minus 10 is a positive 2. On this one, if you're going to group the positives together, you'd end up with all positives. Look, positive 3, positive 4, positive 1, positive 2. Group all the positives together, you're just adding them. So you'd have 4 here, 8 plus that makes positive 10. So in the final answer, there's only one group of positives there, and it's a positive 10. On this one, the groupings of positives is 1 and the 4, so that's positive 5 for those two. And if you're going to group the negatives, that's a negative 3 and a negative 2. That would be a negative 5. If we're adding those two digits, that's 3 plus 2 makes 5. But remember, it's a negative value because it's negative in front of each of those. And if you add those two together, you end up with 0, would be the answer for that one. All right, this might be another way to look at it. If you were to have disguises on these things, you could see that in this case, it's plus a negative 4. Well, plus a negative 4 is essentially this. Plus a negative 4 is negative 4. A 3 without anything is like having a positive 3 minus a negative 5 or negative of a negative 5. Negative of a negative 5 is actually a positive 5. And minus or negative a positive 2 is the same as a negative 2. So now if we grouped our negatives with each other, we have negative 4 and negative 2, which ends up being negative 6. If you add 4 plus 2, that's 6, and then the symbol in front of it would be a negative. If you group the positives together, you have 3 plus 5, that's 8, and it'd be a positive 8. So then you have your positive 8, and then it would be minus 6, or you could say even positive 8. It could be plus a negative 6. Both of those would be the same. And that answer would be a positive 2, or just 2, once you remove the disguises. So let's try that a few more times here. So in this case, this would be a positive 3. If we remove the disguise for that. This one, this is just going to be a positive 4. I can see that this one right here is going to be a negative 6, and this one's going to be a negative 5. So if I group my negatives, I've got negative 6 and negative 5. And my positives, I have positive 3 and positive 4. So positive 3 and positive 4 is positive 7. the negative values would be a negative 11. So I have basically I have a negative 11 plus 7, which is the same as a negative 4. In this one I have negative 3. So what that one is disguised as, this would be a negative 4. And this one's a negative 2. So when I add up all these values, I say that just the absolute value of each of these, 3, 4, and 2 would be 9. But then I need the symbol. This is a negative 3, a negative 4, and a negative 2. When I add them all together, it's going to be that answer, negative 9. On this one, I see this is going to be a negative 6. The disguise there, that one's not disguised. This one's also a negative 6. Anytime you have a positive and a negative value next to each other, it's just going to be when it's positive and a negative right next to each other, you're going to keep the negative, but the positive goes away. Same with this one. This one, it's two positives. Let's skip to this one. This would be a negative 2. So my negative values would be these. And if I was going to group those together, and my positive value is going to be this one and this one because it's got two negatives. Minus a negative 3 is actually a positive 3. So if I were to group my 3 and my 4 together, that's a positive 7. And then I have to group these together. That's 6 plus 2 makes 14, but it's plus a negative, it's going to be a negative 14, which is the same as if I was going to subtract that, it's the same thing as saying 7 minus 14. If I'm looking at the number line, on a number line, that's going to be a negative 7. If I'm at positive 7 and I move 14 to the left, it'll end up going into the negatives, negative 7. If I was at negative 14 and then I moved 7 to the right, I'm going to be at negative 7 as well. All right, so this is similar. What you have to do is remove the disguises on this. What they're talking about is if it has a positive negative 4. Well, what does that mean? That just means that in this case, you'd have a negative 3, and then this would end up being a negative 4. So just removing the disguise. This would actually be a positive 5. So let me write that like this. This would be a positive 5. This piece right here, negative minus a positive 2 is actually a negative 2. And this would be a positive 6, because plus a positive 6 is that. So if I was to group all of my positives, if I grouped all my positives and then I grouped all my negatives, here's what I would end up with. Once I've grouped those forces, I end up with, in this case, it'd be a positive 11. So positive 11, and then it would be minus, let's see, 3, 7, 9, minus 9. And that's going to be my two forces. So again, it's positive 11 minus 9 will equal, in this case, most of us know what 11 minus 9 is already. We know that that's a positive 2. So that would be the answer, which is also the same as 2. Okay. Let's look at this one. So if we've got in our practice here, let's do negative 2 plus a negative 3 minus a negative 4 plus a negative 5. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. What is the answer for letter A? All right, if you group the forces, you would end up with this. Negative 2 minus 3 plus 4 minus 5. And then if you're looking at the negative values, you've got 3 negative values. I see 5, 8, 10. So that's the same as negative 10 plus 4, which is the same as negative 6. So if you got negative 6, you were correct. Let's move on to letter B here. So what if you have negative 3 plus a positive 2 minus a positive 5 minus a negative 6. So the negative forces, this would be a negative 3, negative 5. So I'd have negative 3, negative 5. And the positive forces, it looks like I would have a positive 2 and a positive 6. Two negatives actually makes positive. So in that case, what I'm going to end up with is negative 8. That's the same as negative 8 plus 8. So in the end, the answer to this one you should end up with is 0. So if you got 0, you were correct. All right, try letter C. What is the answer to letter C? My negative forces would be negative 4. I see this one would be a negative 6 because it's got a negative and a positive. The rest of them are going to be positives. So if you guys didn't notice that, this would just be positive 3. This one's a positive because it has two positives. It'd be a positive 7. And then two negatives next to each other actually ends up being a positive 1. So my positive values, I'd have positive 3, positive 7, positive 1. And my negative values, I'd have negative 4 and negative 6. So that ends up being this type of problem. I'd end up with positive 11 and then minus 10 equals, and hopefully you know what 11 minus 10 is. Hopefully you know that it is 1 or positive 1. That would be the answer for letter C. Let's try letter D here. So if you have 2 plus a negative 3 minus a negative 9 minus a positive 7 plus a positive 1. Go ahead and try that. All right, so in this one you should have, this would be a positive 2. So let me use green for that. So positive 2 minus 3, because that's a negative here. This would be a positive 9. So let me do green for that. It's positive 9. This would be a minus 7 because it's a minus a positive 7 makes it just a minus 7. And then for this one, it'd just be plus 1. So in the end, I've got my green forces, looks like 12, so positive 12. And then my negative forces looks like negative 10. And if I put a positive 12 with a negative 10, that would be a positive, in this case, the answer would be a positive 2, or just 2. All right, go ahead and try E. This one, you should have positive 3. It looks like it'd be a positive 5 because there's two negatives, which makes a positive. Then there would be a negative 4 because positive and a minus is a negative 4, and then a negative 2. And then the last one is easy. It's got two positives, which just makes it a positive 8. So I have positive 3, positive 5, positive 8, and then the others are negative. So if I have 8 here, this would be 16. So it'd be positive 16 minus 6. And what does that equal? 16 minus 6 is positive 10, or just 10, if you just answered it that way. All right, on this next one, it looks like we're starting out with negative 10 minus a negative 30 plus a negative 40. What's the answer to that? If you were to do a negative 10, this would be, and this would be a negative 40. Let me just write that one real quick because I've got the red. And this would be a positive 30. So in that case, it looks like I have a positive 30 for my group, and then I have my negative 50. So not 15, negative 50, because 10 plus 40. is 50, and then it has a negative in front of it. So it looks like the answer is going to be negative, and it'll end up being negative 20, because 50, if you're at the negative 50 and you move to the right 30, you're going to be at a negative 20 in that case. Okay. And if we were to do number 21 on this would be the written practice. If you were to look at it like this, you have negative 3 minus 5. There's a negative 2 there. And then this would be a positive 4. So in this case, it looks like I have the positive 4, but I also have a negative 10. So if it's negative 10 plus a positive 4, it's going to be a negative 6. If you look on a number line and you're at a negative 10, and you're supposed to move 4 places to the right, that's going to end up being at negative 6. There's negative 9, negative 8, negative 7, negative 6. So that's where you'd end up being. All right, go ahead and give these a shot. You can look back in your textbook to help you answer these questions again. How would you read the expressions? So how would you read this out loud? Using words. So using your words, type out what you would say if you were to read this expression. And you just need to review it. You can see it on the top of your quiz paper, or just review the beginning of the video again. It's also on the Go Formative if you guys look at that. But check those out. Make sure you guys review that. How would you read each of these expressions, and then simplify 5 through 10. All right, make sure you guys finish that before midnight tonight and come back tomorrow for more math. Thanks for watching.